When my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I smiled instead of crying. I don't know why I did that. Maybe I thought if I smiled, she'd change her mind. Maybe I wanted to leave with a little dignity. The kind that hurts less when you close the door behind you. Before continuing, please subscribe to our channel and like our video. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that smelled like rain and reheated coffee. I was standing by the kitchen counter, holding a plate I'd just washed, her favorite plate, the one with little blue flowers around the edge. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't look angry. In fact, she looked tired. Tired in that way only a woman who's been carrying too much for too long can look. "Mom," she said softly, I think it's better if you stay somewhere else for a while." The words slipped out of her mouth like a slow drip of water. Gentle, but they sank right into my heart. I stood there, the dish towel still in my hand, pretending to wipe something on the counter that was already clean. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, and I smiled, a small, shaky smile that felt too heavy for my face. "All right," I said, "if that's what you want." But what I wanted was to ask why. What had I done wrong? Was it something I said? Something I didn't do? Did I love too loudly? Or maybe too quietly? She didn't answer my unspoken questions. She just turned back to the sink, her hands trembling slightly as she washed a cup that didn't need washing either. I remember her voice cracking when she whispered, "Thank you for understanding. Understanding." Didn't understand a thing. My son wasn't home that day. He was at work, the new promotion keeping him later and later every week. Told myself I'd talk to him when he came home. I'd tell him what happened, and maybe he'd smile that calm smile of his and say, "Mom, it's just a misunderstanding." But when he came home that evening, he looked different, not angry, not even upset, just tired, the same way she looked. He hugged me, but it felt like one of those hugs that start out of habit and end out of distance. He didn't mention what she'd said, and neither did I. We both sat there, pretending everything was fine, while silence filled the spaces where love used to live freely. Dinner that night was quiet. She cooked like always, chicken and mashed potatoes, my son's favorite, but no one really tasted anything. Her eyes stayed on her plate, and his stayed on his phone, and I looked at both of them, realizing I didn't belong in that silence anymore. After dinner, I went to my room and packed a small bag, just the essentials, a few clothes, my medications, and the little framed photo of my late husband, the one where he's holding our son as a baby, laughing. I touched the glass of that frame and whispered, "Do you see this, Harold? They don't need me anymore." I slept poorly that night. The sound of the clock ticking by my bed felt louder than usual, like it was counting down the moments before something big was about to change. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. The house was still, the kind of quiet that almost hurts. I made myself a cup of coffee, black, like always, and sat by the window. That's when I saw her in the driveway. She was sitting in her car, head on the steering wheel, shoulders shaking, crying. I almost opened the door to go to her, but something in me said stay. I watched her wipe her tears quickly when she thought no one could see. Then she started the car and drove off. I remember thinking, she must be under a lot of stress. Maybe I've been too much for her. Maybe I've overstayed. So I made a decision. I'd leave before things got worse. That afternoon, I folded the blanket on my bed neatly and placed it at the end like I always did. I left a note on the kitchen counter, short, polite, and a little too careful. "Thank you for everything. I'll stay with Margaret for a few days. Don't worry about me. Love, Mom." When I closed the front door, I thought I'd feel relieved. Instead, it felt like something inside me cracked, quietly, but deeply. The air outside was cool, and the wind smelled like the coming rain. I walked slowly to the bus stop, clutching my handbag like it could hold my heart together. A few neighbors waved, and I waved back, smiling again, always smiling. Because in small towns like ours, people notice, and I didn't want anyone to see the loneliness dripping from my eyes. As the bus moved through the streets, I looked out the window at the houses I'd known for decades, Mrs. Tilley's porch with her hanging ferns, the diner where my son had his first date, the church where we said goodbye to my husband. Every corner held a memory, every turn whispered, "You belong here," but home didn't feel like home anymore. When I reached Margaret's, my old friend from church, she hugged me without asking a single question. That's the kind of friend she's always been. "You can stay as long as you need," she said, patting my back gently. And that night, when I lay in her guest room, I finally let myself cry, not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. Days turned into a week. A week turned into 2. No call from my son. No text, not even a short message saying, "Mom, how are you?" I told myself he was busy. Work, life, maybe even guilt. I tried not to take it personally, but deep down, I knew something had shifted, not just between me and her, but between me and him too. Every evening, Margaret and I would sit on her porch with cups of tea. She'd talk about her grandchildren, her garden, her new recipe for peach cobbler, and I'd nod and smile, pretending I was listening while my mind replayed every moment in that kitchen. Her voice, her tired eyes, the way she said, "I think it's better if you stay somewhere else." Why? What was she protecting? What did I not see? One evening, about 3 weeks later, my phone buzzed. It was my son. "Mom," his message said, "can I come see you tomorrow?" My heart jumped. I typed back, "Of course, sweetheart. Anytime." That night, I couldn't sleep. I cleaned the little guest room twice, made sure the bed was perfectly neat, brewed a pot of tea just to fill the house with a welcoming smell. When he arrived the next morning, he looked pale, older somehow. He hugged me, tighter this time. We sat at the table. He didn't touch his tea. "Mom," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something about Emily." His voice trembled when he said her name. I felt the world slow down. For a moment, everything, the ticking clock, the cars outside, the birds, went still. That was the moment I realized the truth I'd been afraid to face. There was something I didn't know, something that explained the sadness in her eyes, something that would change how I saw both of them. Forever. I often think about how it all began, how our little family came together. Not in grand ways, not with fireworks or fancy dinners, but with small, quiet moments that made my heart full. You see, I never imagined myself as the kind of mother-in-law people whisper about at church, the overly involved one or the difficult one. No, I was just a woman who'd raised one son, loved one man, and found peace in her garden. After my husband, Harold, passed away, my son, Michael, became the center of my world. He was the reason I got up in the morning, the reason I learned to keep living even when the house felt too big and too quiet. Michael was a good boy. Always had been, the kind who said thank you without being told, who carried groceries for the old ladies next door, who kissed my cheek before heading off to school, even in high school, when most boys pretend their mothers don't exist. When he met Emily, I'll admit, I didn't think much at first. She was shy the first time he brought her home, quiet, polite, with those big brown eyes that darted around like she was afraid to break something. But she smiled when she saw the roses in my garden, and that smile stayed with me. "I've never seen roses this big," she said, bending to smell one. "They smell like my childhood." Right then, something softened in me. Anyone who loves flowers, I thought, Can't be too bad. Their love grew quietly. No big gestures. No drama. Just two people who fit together like pieces from the same puzzle. When he told me he was going to marry her, I didn't cry like I thought I would. Instead, I just held his face in my hands and said, "You take good care of her, and let her take care of you too." The wedding was small, just family and a few close friends. We held it in the church on Maple Street, the one with the white wooden pews and sunlight streaming through the stained glass. I remember Emily's dress, simple, ivory lace, nothing showy, but she glowed. Truly glowed, and my son, well, he couldn't stop looking at her. When the pastor said, "You may kiss the bride," I felt tears roll down my cheeks, not because I was losing a son, but because I was gaining a daughter, or at least, that's what I believed. After they married, they moved into a small house just 3 streets away from mine, close enough for Sunday dinners, far enough for them to have their own space. It felt perfect. Every Sunday, I'd cook a big meal, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans from my garden, and pie for dessert. Sometimes Emily would help me in the kitchen, apron tied too loose, hair falling into her face as she tried to peel potatoes. "Mom," she'd say. She started calling me that early on, which warmed my heart. "You make this look so easy," and I'd laugh. "That's because I've been doing it for 40 years. You'll get there." We'd talk about little things while we cooked. Her job at the library, Michael's long hours at the insurance office, the neighbor's latest gossip. Nothing deep, just everyday talk that makes a house feel alive. But sometimes, when she thought I wasn't looking, I'd catch her staring out the window. Her face would go blank, not sad, just far away, and when I asked if everything was all right, she'd smile too quickly and say, "Of course." "Mom, everything's perfect." I wanted to believe her, and so I did. A year later, Michael got that big promotion at work. It meant more money, but also more hours. He started leaving before sunrise and coming home after dinner, too tired to talk about much. Emily would say, "He's just adjusting." "Mom, it's a lot of pressure," and I'd nod, remembering how Harold once worked himself to the bone to provide for us. But sometimes, I wondered, how long could love survive when one heart was always waiting and the other was always running? I began to visit more often, bringing over casseroles or flowers from my garden. Emily always greeted me with a hug, but there was a nervousness in her touch, as if she was grateful I was there, but also worried about something she couldn't name. Once, I noticed a small bruise on her wrist. When I asked about it, she laughed softly and said, "Oh, I tripped on the porch step. I'm so clumsy." But there was something in her eyes, not fear, but something close to it, that made me ache inside. Of course, I didn't say anything to Michael. I didn't want to cause trouble. Mothers of grown sons learn to hold their tongues, especially when the truth might sound like meddling. When they invited me to live with them after my knee surgery, I was hesitant. I didn't want to be a burden, but Emily insisted. "Mom," she said, "you took care of us for years. Let us take care of you now." And so, I moved into the spare bedroom, small but cozy, with a view of the backyard. At first, it was nice. She'd bring me tea every morning. We'd watch the news together, laugh about silly commercials, share recipes. It felt like family, real family. But as weeks turned into months, something shifted. Little things, like how she'd go quiet when I entered a room, or how Michael's eyes would dart between us, as if trying to keep peace in a war that hadn't been declared yet. I told myself it was nothing, that maybe she was tired, that living together can make even good relationships tense. But deep down, I knew the air had changed. There was something heavy in that house, something unspoken. One evening, I woke up in the middle of the night and heard voices in the kitchen. Emily's voice was low, shaky, Michael's sounded strained. "I can't keep doing this," she whispered. "You don't have to," he said. Just a little longer. Then silence. A long, aching silence. I lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering what this meant. Wanted to believe they were talking about work or bills or some small thing, but her tone told me otherwise. It was the kind of voice that comes from someone holding too much pain. The next morning, they both acted like nothing happened, smiling, talking, asking if I slept well. I pretended to believe them, but my heart didn't. Sometimes when she thought I wasn't watching, I saw her take pills, little white ones. She said they were vitamins. I wanted to believe that too, but I'd been around enough to recognize the look of someone surviving, not thriving. One day I offered to go with her to the doctor, just casually. She hesitated, then said she'd already gone. The way she said it, too quick, too polite, told me she was lying. Still, I didn't push, because love, I've learned, can make you blind, especially the kind of love that's mixed with fear. And maybe, in my own way, I was afraid too. Afraid to see cracks in the picture I'd painted of our happy little family. Looking back now, I realize how much I missed. How many signs were there, quietly waiting for me to notice. Her tired eyes, his distracted silence, the way they both avoided talking about the future. It was like watching two people drown while smiling at the shore. But at the time, I just told myself, they're fine. They love each other. They're just tired. And I went back to my garden, my cooking, my quiet prayers at night. I didn't know that beneath that calm surface, something much deeper was unraveling, and I didn't know that the day she asked me to leave, the day my heart broke, was the day she was trying to protect me from something I couldn't have understood then. It's strange how silence can grow between people, not all at once, not like a slammed door or a loud argument, but like ivy, slow, quiet, creeping over everything, until you wake up one day and realize you can't see the sunlight anymore. That's how it felt living in that house. At first, I blamed the long work hours, the stress, the routines, but then it became clear. The distance wasn't just in their schedules, it was in their hearts. I'd sit at the kitchen table with my morning coffee, watching them rush out the door. Michael would kiss Emily's forehead, say, "Love you, babe," and grab his briefcase. She'd smile, a practiced, polite smile, and say, "Drive safe," but their eyes never met. Not really. Sometimes, I'd stand by the window and wave as he drove away. She'd stand beside me, arms folded, watching his car disappear around the corner. Then she'd sigh, so softly I almost missed it, and whisper, "He doesn't even see it, does he?" I'd ask, "See what, honey?" She'd blink, smile again, and say, "Nothing. Mom, just talking to myself." And that was that. There were little things that began to pile up, the kind that don't seem like much until you put them together, like how she stopped joining us for Sunday dinners at Margaret's, or how she started locking the bedroom door at night. Something she never did before, or how some evenings she'd sit in the backyard for hours, staring at the fence as if waiting for someone to appear on the other side. Once, I walked outside and sat beside her. The air was cool, and the smell of wet grass filled the yard. "Emily," I said softly, "you've been quiet lately. Are you all right?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Do you ever feel like you're in a story you didn't mean to be part of?" Her question startled me. I asked what she meant, but she shook her head and smiled. That small, sad smile again. "Never mind. I'm just being dramatic." But her eyes told me it wasn't drama. It was truth. Quiet, hidden truth. That night, I heard her crying in her room, soft, muffled sobs. like someone trying not to wake the world. I wanted to knock on the door, to hold her like a mother should, but I didn't. I told myself it wasn't my place. I was just the mother-in-law, the guest in the house that wasn't truly mine anymore. Instead, I sat in my room, staring at the framed picture of Harold again. I whispered, "If you were here, you'd know what to do." "You always did." He'd been gone for almost 10 years, but I still heard his voice sometimes. "Be gentle," he used to say, "even when it hurts." So I tried, but gentleness felt a lot like helplessness. One morning, I noticed she hadn't eaten breakfast. Her plate was untouched, her tea cold. When I asked if she wasn't feeling well, she said, "Just not hungry," but her face was pale, and her hands shook slightly as she poured more tea. I could see how thin she'd gotten. So, later that day, I decided to make her favorite, chicken soup with soft noodles and rosemary. I thought maybe a warm meal would lift her spirits. When she came home, I greeted her with a smile. "Look, honey, I made your favorite." She froze for a moment, then forced a smile. That's so kind of you, Mom. Thank you." But she didn't sit down to eat. Instead, she walked to the sink, turned on the water, and stood there, just standing, staring out the window, as if she couldn't move. After a while, she whispered, "It smells like my mother's kitchen." Her voice cracked. I didn't know what to say, so I just said softly, "I'm glad." "I'm sure she was a good cook." She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. She was. Before she got sick, then, she left the room before I could say another word. That was the first time she ever mentioned her mother's illness, and something in the way she said it, the way her shoulders shook when she walked away, made my heart twist. Weeks passed, and I began to notice how carefully she avoided certain topics. Whenever Michael's name came up, she'd change the subject. Whenever I mentioned the future, vacations, children, even little things, she'd smile, nod, and drift away into silence. And then there were the nights Michael didn't come home. He'd text her late, working late. "Don't wait up." I'd hear her phone buzz, and she'd just stare at it for a long time before setting it face down on the table. Once, I tried to comfort her. "Sweetheart, he loves you. You know that, right?" She smiled faintly. "I know, Mom, he just loves differently than I do." That sentence stayed with me for weeks. Loves differently. What did that mean? Then one afternoon, I overheard a phone call that made my heart pound. I didn't mean to listen. Truly. I was dusting the hallway when I heard her voice through the slightly open bedroom door. "Yes," she said quietly. "I've been taking them." "No, he doesn't know. I can't tell him yet." Pause. "I'll come in tomorrow. But please, no more tests right now. I just need a little more time." Her voice trembled. I froze, the feather duster still in my hand. "Tests? Pills? What was happening?" I stepped back slowly, pretending I hadn't heard, but my chest felt tight, and that night I couldn't sleep. Something was wrong. Something serious, but she was hiding it, and I didn't know how to help without breaking the fragile peace that still existed between us. The next morning, I decided to talk to Michael. He was having breakfast before work. Scrolling through his phone as usual, I sat across from him and said, "Son, can I ask you something?" He looked up, distracted. "Sure, Mom, what's up? Is everything all right with Emily?" He froze. For a moment, his face went blank. Then he said quickly, "Of course. Why? She seems tired lately, and she's not eating much. Maybe she should see a doctor." He gave a short laugh. "Too short, too nervous." "She's fine, Mom. Don't worry. You know how she gets during busy weeks." Then he kissed my forehead, grabbed his jacket, and left before I could say anything more. But as he walked out, I saw it, the way his hand trembled slightly when he picked up his coffee mug. He was scared too. After that, the house felt heavier than ever. Even the air seemed thick with words no one wanted to speak. I tried to fill the silence with little things. Baking, gardening, folding laundry. But no matter how much I did, the weight in that house stayed. And then, one evening, everything shifted again. I had just finished folding laundry when I heard a sound from the bathroom. A thud. I rushed to the door and called out, "Emily? Are you okay?" No answer. I knocked again, panic rising. "Emily?" Finally, I heard the lock click, and she opened the door. She looked pale, trembling, her eyes red from crying. "I'm fine," she said weakly. "Just slipped, that's all." But behind her, I saw the little orange pill bottle on the counter. The label had her name on it, and underneath it I caught one word. Oncology. I felt my stomach drop. I didn't need to read more. Knew. I wanted to hold her right. There, ask her why she hadn't told us. Tell her she didn't have to carry this alone, but she looked at me with eyes so full of quiet pleading that I couldn't. "Speak, please," she whispered. "Don't tell Michael." Not yet. Her voice was breaking, and in that moment, I understood everything, the distance, the sadness. The walls between us, they weren't built out of anger. They were built out of fear. She wasn't pushing me away to hurt me. She was protecting me, protecting us. So I nodded. "I won't," I said softly, and I didn't. But that night, I cried myself to sleep, because for the first time in my life, love felt like silence, and I hated it. The morning my son came to see me at Margaret's, I knew something was wrong before he even spoke. He looked older. Not in his face, but in his eyes. The kind of tired that sleep can't fix. His hair was uncombed, and his hands trembled slightly as he took off his jacket. "Mom," he said, his voice low and careful, "we need to talk about Emily." My heart clenched. It wasn't a surprise. I'd been waiting for this moment, but still, hearing it said out loud made the world feel unsteady. I poured him a cup of tea and set it in front of him. He didn't touch it. He just stared into the steam rising from it like he was searching for courage there. Finally, he said it. "She's sick, Mom." I nodded slowly, as if I hadn't already guessed. "What kind of sick, Michael?" He swallowed hard. "Cancer. They found it about 6 months ago. She didn't want to tell anyone. Not even me at first." The words hit me like a wave. Even though I'd seen the signs, even though I'd held the truth quietly in my chest for weeks, hearing him say it made my throat tighten. I whispered, 6 months. He nodded. "She's been going through treatment quietly. She said she didn't want to make it real by talking about it. Said she didn't want pity." He rubbed his face with both hands and sighed. "I thought she was just tired from work." But then I started noticing the bruises, the pills, the appointments she wouldn't talk about. I begged her to tell me what was going on, but she kept saying she was fine. He paused. "When you moved in, she said she didn't want you to find out. She didn't want you to worry. She said she loved you like her own mother, and she couldn't stand the thought of you sitting up at night crying over her." Tears welled in my eyes. "She told me to leave," I whispered. "That day, she said it was better if I stayed somewhere else." He nodded slowly. "She said she couldn't handle both, the treatments and pretending everything was okay around you. She thought she'd break if you looked at her and saw it. She didn't want anyone to treat her like she was dying." I covered my mouth with my hand as tears finally escaped. All this time, I'd been hurt, thinking she didn't want me around. But the truth was, she was trying to protect me from her pain. Michael leaned back, his voice trembling. "She's been getting chemo in the next town. Every Friday, alone." "Alone?" I asked, shocked. "Why on earth would she go alone?" "She didn't want me to see her like that," he said softly. "She said she wanted me to remember her as strong, not sick." "But last week?" He took a deep breath. "Last week she fainted at work. They called me. That's how I found out everything. My hands went cold. Oh, dear God. He looked at me then, his eyes red, his lips trembling. I thought I knew what love was, Mom, but I didn't. Not until now. I didn't realize how much she'd been hiding just to keep me safe from pain. I reached across the table and took his hand. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The room was filled with the sound of the rain outside, steady and soft like a heartbeat. Finally, I whispered, "Where is she now?" "She's home," he said. "Sleeping. She had another treatment yesterday. She told me she wanted to be alone this weekend, but—" He paused. "I can't leave her like that anymore. She needs us, Mom. She needs you." That evening, I packed my small bag again, the same bag I'd brought with me when I left their house. But this time, it wasn't heavy with hurt. It was heavy with love. As I zipped it shut, I said quietly to myself, "All right, Emily, you tried to protect me. But now it's my turn." Margaret drove me back to their house the next morning. The sky was gray, and the world felt quiet, as if even the wind knew it wasn't a day for noise. When we pulled up, I saw the curtains drawn. The house looked smaller somehow, tired, like the people inside it. I thanked Margaret, took a deep breath, and walked to the door. Michael opened it before I could knock. "She's in the bedroom," he whispered. "She's sleeping." I nodded and walked softly down the hall. Every step felt like a prayer. When I reached the doorway, I saw her, lying on her side, wrapped in a thin blanket. Her hair was shorter now, her face pale, but her expression was peaceful. On the nightstand sat a glass of water, a few folded tissues, and that same photo of her and Michael from their wedding day. My throat tightened. I sat in the chair beside her bed and just watched her breathe. Slow, gentle, fragile. I wanted to wake her, but I couldn't bring myself to do it, so I just sat there, holding her hand, the same hand that once trembled when she cooked beside me, the same hand that had pushed me away out of love. She stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw me, for a moment she looked confused. Then her lips curved into a weak smile. "Mom," she whispered. "Hey, sweetheart," I said softly. "I'm here." Tears filled her eyes. "I didn't want you to see me like this." I squeezed her hand. "You don't get to decide that. You're my daughter. You hear me? You've always been." She laughed weakly, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I tried to protect you. I didn't want you to worry." "I worried anyway," I said. "For a while,
That's what mothers
we
do."
just sat there. No words, just breathing the same quiet air. I could feel her fingers trembling in mine, but her grip was strong. Stronger than I expected. "Finally," she whispered. "Michael knows now. He's been so kind, but he blames himself." "He shouldn't," I said. "You were both trying to protect each other. That's what love does. Sometimes it hurts us while trying to save us." She smiled faintly. "You sound like him, always finding meaning in pain." "Maybe I learned it from you," I said. For the next few days I stayed with them. I cooked, cleaned, and kept her company while Michael was at work. Some days she was strong enough to sit on the porch with me. We'd watch the neighborhood kids ride their bikes, the mailman walking his usual route, the world still spinning, quietly, kindly. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, she said something I'll never forget. "Do you know what I'm most afraid of?" I looked at her. "What, sweetheart?" "That he'll forget to live after I'm gone." My chest ached. "Don't talk like that," she smiled softly. "It's okay, Mom, I'm not giving up. I'm just accepting, but promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll remind him that love doesn't end. It just changes shape." I swallowed hard and nodded. "I promise." That night, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the steam from my cup of tea. I thought about all the years I'd spent thinking love was about doing, cooking, cleaning, caring. providing. But Emily had shown me something else. Love, I realized, was also about letting go, about allowing people to protect you, even when it hurts. And I thought about my own pride, how I'd misunderstood her silence, her distance, how I'd taken her kindness and her quiet strength and mistaken it for rejection. Tears fell into my tea, and I let them. Because this time I wasn't crying out of hurt, I was crying out of understanding. The next morning, she came into the kitchen slowly, wrapped in her robe. Her hair was tucked under a scarf, her eyes tired but bright. "Morning." "Mom," she said softly. "Morning, sweetheart," I replied. "How'd you sleep?" "Better," she smiled. "It helps knowing I'm not hiding anymore." We sat together at the table, sunlight spilling through the curtains. For a moment, everything felt normal again. Two women sharing coffee and quiet laughter in a small-town kitchen. That's when I realized the walls between us were gone. What stood in their place was love, raw and simple, and though I knew the road ahead would be hard, filled with hospitals, medicines, and uncertain tomorrows, I also knew we'd walk it together. Because no matter how broken something feels, when it's held with love, it still shines. The weeks that followed were quieter, not in the heavy way they had been before, but in the peaceful way that comes after a storm has passed, the kind of quiet that feels like healing. Every morning, I'd wake before Emily and Michael. I'd make tea and watch the sunrise spill across their kitchen floor. The sound of the kettle became my prayer, the rising steam my small offering to the day ahead. Emily began to regain a little strength. The treatment still made her weak, but she smiled more often. Sometimes we'd sit on the porch with blankets over our legs, the air cool and still, watching the mailman walk his route. She liked to talk about small things. The birds, the neighbor's cat that always found its way to the porch, the smell of the pine trees after rain. It was those small, ordinary things that became our lifeline. One afternoon, as the wind moved through the trees, she said, "You know, Mom, I used to think strength meant keeping everything inside." I looked at her. "And now?" She smiled faintly. "Now I think strength is just being brave enough to say you're scared." Her words sank into me. I thought of all the times in my own life when I'd done the same, held pain like a secret, just to protect the ones I loved, and how that silence had built walls between us, even when all I wanted was to be close. I reached for her hand. "You've taught me more about love in these few months than I learned in a lifetime." She squeezed my fingers. "You've always known love, Mom. You just forgot to give some of it to yourself." Michael was changing too. He took more time off work, started cooking dinner sometimes. Nothing fancy, just simple meals that filled the house with familiar smells. He'd make her favorite soups, slice fruit for her breakfast, and sit with her during her treatments instead of waiting in the car like before. It was hard for him at first, to see her fragile, to accept that she couldn't always smile through the pain. But little by little, I watched him soften. One evening, I came into the kitchen and saw him holding her hands across the table. He was whispering something I couldn't hear, but the way he looked at her, with tears shining in his eyes, told me everything. That was the moment I realized my son had finally learned how to love not with strength, but with tenderness. He wasn't the confident man who always needed to fix everything anymore. He was just a man holding on to the woman who made his world feel whole. And that was real love. One evening, the three of us sat by the fire. The light flickered softly against the walls, wrapping the room in gold and orange hues. Emily rested her head on Michael's shoulder. She looked peaceful, her hair growing back in soft wisps. "Do you ever think," she asked quietly, "that pain teaches us more than joy ever could?" I smiled gently. "It does. Because joy is easy to hold. Pain makes us dig deeper, she nodded. I think I needed to learn how to let people love me without pretending to be okay. Michael kissed her forehead. You never had to pretend for me, she smiled faintly. I know that now, the fire crackled softly. The only other sound was the rain tapping gently on the window, and for the first time in a long while, I felt peace. Deep, steady, honest peace. A few days later, I found Emily in the garden. She was sitting on a small wooden bench near the rose bushes, bundled in her sweater, a blanket over her lap. My rose bushes. I had brought a few cuttings from my own garden months ago, and she'd planted them here, carefully, tenderly, even when she didn't have much strength. Now they were blooming. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. Look, she said softly. They're finally growing. I sat beside her, breathing in the familiar scent. They're beautiful. She touched one of the petals. You know, when I planted these, I didn't think I'd live to see them bloom. I turned to her, my throat tightening. Don't say that, she smiled sadly. I'm not giving up, Mom. I'm just grateful I got to see this. I nodded, fighting tears. You'll see many more. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Maybe. But if I don't, promise me you'll keep taking care of him. He'll need you more than ever. My eyes filled. Of course. But you'll be here too. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I could feel her heart saying what her mouth couldn't. Thank you. I love you. And I'm ready for whatever comes next. Time passed, and summer arrived. Some days were good. Some were not. But through every day there was love. Quiet, steady, and stronger than anything else. On her better mornings, she'd sit with me and Michael on the porch, drinking tea. On her harder days, she'd rest. And I'd read to her. Old books, letters from her childhood, sometimes even recipes. I discovered a little notebook she kept by her bed, filled with notes and small quotes. On one page, she'd written, "Maybe love is not about holding on forever, but about holding each other long enough to let go gently." I read that line over and over until it became part of me. Then, one evening as the sun was setting, Emily called me to her room. Her voice was soft but steady. "Mom," she said, "there's something I want to give you." She reached into her bedside drawer and pulled out a small wooden box. "I was going to wait," she said, "but I want you to have it now." Inside was a locket, gold, slightly worn, with a tiny rose engraved on the front. "It was my mother's," she said. "She gave it to me when she got sick. Said it would remind me that love doesn't die, it just changes places." Tears welled in my eyes. I opened the locket and saw a tiny picture inside, her and Michael, laughing. I pressed it to my chest. "Thank you, sweetheart," she smiled faintly. "It belongs with you now." "You're my mother, too." I couldn't speak. I just held her hand, feeling her warmth, memorizing every moment. The days grew slower after that. Her strength faded little by little, like candlelight at the end of the night. But her spirit never dimmed, even on her hardest days. She'd whisper, "It's okay, Mom. We had love. That's more than enough." And she was right. One morning, as I was sitting beside her, she opened her eyes and smiled. "You know," she whispered, "I was wrong about one thing." "What's that, sweetheart?" "I thought I was protecting you. But you were protecting me all along." I took her hand and kissed it gently. "That's what mothers do, my love." She closed her eyes again, still smiling. The room was filled with sunlight, soft, golden, like a blessing. And in that moment, my heart unlocked completely. I finally understood that love isn't about who takes care of whom. It's about being present, through fear, through loss, through everything, and still choosing to stay. That night, I went out to the garden. The roses were blooming under the moonlight, glowing pale against the dark. I touched one gently and whispered, "Thank you, not just to her, but to life, to love, to every small, hard, beautiful thing that had brought us here." And though tears filled my eyes, they weren't from sadness anymore. They were from gratitude, because even though my heart was breaking, it was finally free. When the end finally came, it was quiet. No rush of panic. No last-minute words. Just peace, like a sigh released after a long, brave journey. Emily passed away one early morning in late August. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the sky had started to blush with soft pink and gray. I was sitting by her bedside, half asleep, holding her hand. She took one deep breath, and then another. And then nothing. It was so still that for a moment I didn't even realize. The world didn't stop. The clock kept ticking, but everything inside me did. I held her hand to my heart, feeling its stillness, and through the tears I whispered, "Thank you, sweetheart. Thank you for letting me love you." Michael came in minutes later, his eyes swollen from sleepless nights. He fell to his knees beside the bed, buried his face in her hand, and cried in a way I'd never heard before. There are no words for that kind of sound, the kind that comes from somewhere deeper than pain. I put my hand on his shoulder, and we sat like that for a long time. No talking, just silence, the kind of silence that isn't empty, the kind that's full of everything love ever was. The funeral was small, just family and a few close friends. The church smelled of lilies and candle wax. I sat in the front row, holding the little gold locket she had given me, pressed tight against my palm. When the pastor spoke about her kindness, her strength, and the way she touched lives quietly, I nodded through my tears, because that was Emily. Never loud, never seeking attention, just quietly changing hearts by being herself. After the service, people came to hug us. They said the usual words. "She was so special. She'll be missed. She's in a better place." And I smiled, because they were right. But when everyone left, and the church grew quiet again, Michael and I stayed. He stood by her photo, that same picture from their wedding day, and whispered, "I thought I'd have more time." I walked up beside him and said softly, "We always think that, honey." He nodded, tears rolling freely down his face. Then he said something that broke me and healed me at the same time. She used to say love was the only thing that doesn't die. And in that quiet church, with the candles flickering and her voice still lingering somewhere in our hearts, I realized she was right. After the funeral, the days moved slowly. The house felt emptier, even though I was still there. But it wasn't the kind of emptiness that hurts. Not anymore. It was the kind that makes space for memory, for meaning, for love to breathe. Michael started working again. Just part-time at first. He'd come home in the evenings and sit with me on the porch. Sometimes we didn't speak. We just watched the sun go down side by side. One night he turned to me and said, "I don't know how you stayed so strong through all this, Mom." I smiled softly. "I didn't, sweetheart. I just learned to be gentle with what hurt." He nodded slowly. "She always said you were her safe place." Hearing that made my chest ache in the best way, because for so long, I thought I'd failed her by not seeing her pain, by misunderstanding her silence. But maybe in the end, she knew I loved her anyway. I started tending the garden again. The roses she planted were blooming brighter than ever. Soft pinks, deep reds, golden creams. Every time I pruned one or watered them, I felt her there beside me. Sometimes I'd even talk to her, just softly under my breath. "I hope you're resting easy, sweetheart." Or, "You'd love how these have grown." And maybe it sounds foolish, but sometimes I swear I could feel a light breeze move through the petals, as if she were answering. One morning, Michael handed me an envelope. "Emily wrote this for you," he said. "She asked me to give it to you after a while." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a short letter, just a few lines, written in her delicate handwriting. "Mom, if you're reading this, it means I've gone home. Please don't cry too long. You gave me the gift of feeling loved like a daughter. Not an obligation. You made my last days soft, not heavy. Take care of Michael for me. And keep tending the roses. Every time one blooms, that's me, reminding you that love never leaves. With all my heart, Emily." I pressed the letter to my chest, tears falling freely. And for the first time since she passed, I felt peace, not just the kind that settles you, but the kind that fills you. Months have passed now. The seasons have changed. Autumn has come, painting the small town in gold and orange. Life has found a new rhythm. Michael visits often, brings groceries, fixes little things around the house. He laughs more now, the kind of laugh that carries memory but not misery. Some evenings, he brings old photo albums and we sit together on the couch, remembering. We talk about her, not like someone who's gone, but like someone who's still part of us. He told me once, "You know, Mom, I think she taught me how to live even as she was dying." And I smiled. She did that for both of us. Sometimes I sit on the porch alone at sunset, watching the world slow down. The air smells of pine and warm earth. The sky fades from gold to blue. I hold the little gold locket she gave me and whisper, "I understand now." Because I do. I understand that love isn't about grand gestures or forever promises. It's about presence, showing up for each other. Even when you're scared, even when it hurts. It's about forgiving yourself for not knowing, and forgiving others for not saying. It's about finding beauty in endings, because endings are just another kind of beginning, and it's about learning, finally, that love, true love, never really leaves. It lingers in the smallest places, in the smell of roses, in the warmth of tea shared on a quiet morning, in the laughter of someone remembering a voice they can no longer hear. That's what love really means. Sometimes I still dream of her. In the dream, she's standing by the garden, sunlight in her hair, smiling that soft, peaceful smile. She doesn't say anything. She just nods, like she's telling me everything's okay, and I wake up smiling too, because I know she's right. Everything is okay. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that life keeps teaching us long after we think we're done. Learning and love, real love, is not about holding on forever. It's about holding each other long enough to say goodbye with peace in your heart. So every morning, when I walk through the garden and see the roses blooming, I whisper a thank you for her, for my son, for the pain that turned into grace, and for the quiet truth that changed everything. Because my daughter-in-law's secret didn't just change how I saw my son. It changed how I saw love itself.